Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever, which part of the world you are hearing and joined us today listening to this podcast. Today, we have Gabrielle Gueye, who has vast experience and knowledge on investment banking. Damn it, I screwed it up. Correct?
It's a,
Impact investing and private sector. All right. This is little difficult for me.
oh
All right.
no, don't. I record videos with my team and we have many takes sometimes.
All right. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from whichever part of the world you are. Today, we have Gabrielle Gueye, who has joined us, and she has vast experience on impact investing and private sector engagement. Gabby is going to share us all the details and several insights if you want to take a role in this industry or if you are looking for something in private sector engagement. So with that, I first want to thank Gabby to take this time to share her knowledge and help out people out there who are looking for jobs, who want to make a career into this sector. Gabby, thank you so much for joining.
Of, of course, no problem. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Absolutely. Gabby, before we get into like very deep dive into this impact investing thing, what is the best thing that you enjoy about this role?
I think the thing that I enjoy the most about my area of work is being able to do something kind of new and innovative in international development. And I'll go into that a little bit more when we get into the nitty gritty details. But it really is an innovative area and is causing a lot of practitioners to think differently about how they finance international development projects and also who they're working with and who they're partnering with. And there's just a lot of potential to kind of solve some of the issues that we see in our sector through this type of work.
Hmm. Very interesting. Gabby, personally, me myself, like when I was talking to you about this sector is very, very new for me, and I have very limited knowledge. So it will be great to understand, like, what is this impact investing all about?
Sure. So impact investing is kind of an area that you can see across several industries. The industry that I specifically, or we call it a sector, that I specifically work in is international development and humanitarian aid. So that's literally using, donor funds, funds from the private sector potentially, and money from other institutional donors to carry out like development projects overseas. So when you think about, some of the basic examples you could think of like building wells or, building schools or developing like curriculums and programs for education or health programs. The list goes on and on. Those are the types of projects that organizations like mine design and carry out and implement, and then close out with the hope of making some sort of a development impact or having certain outcomes. So that's the sector as a whole. Now, impact investing is like placing money into enterprises, like small businesses and such, organizations, and more with the purpose of generating measurable social or environmental impact. And of course, whoever the investor is, they have their kind of their strategies and their alignments, and we want to make sure that they are in line with um, our goals as development organizations. And also not forgetting that we do expect a financial return, but it's a little less rigid than traditional investing. Um, and also another term that we kind of throw around in impact investing is blended finance.
Mhm.
So it's using investment capital along with philanthropic funding or donor funding in order to advance humanitarian and development outcomes. So
Gotcha.
that's the gist.
Gotcha. And how does this private sector engagement play around with this?
Yeah, so I like to think you can't do impact investing without private sector engagement. Private sector engagement is essentially, just like it sounds, engaging with the private sector, building relationships, and pulling private organizations, businesses, enterprises in the local context into these development programs from the very beginning, even when you're thinking about what is the actual central problem here, all the way down to closeout. How can the private sector in that local context be involved? And oftentimes, impact investors fall into that category of private sector actors.
Gotcha. So Gabby, like you also graduated from Thunderbird, and we also it's a very different industry or sector per se that you are in. If someone wants to get into this sector, how they should approach it?
Sure. And you know what's funny? Just to go back to the Thunderbird thing, I work at Catholic Relief Services, which
Mhm.
is based in Baltimore, and they actually did come out and do a recruiting event at Thunderbird. And I was thinking to myself, like, what are they doing here? You know, because usually you see Johnson and Johnson and Coca-Cola and those types of like huge, well-known type organizations, private sector organizations at Thunderbird, but there's definitely room for people who are into humanitarian and philanthropic work to who go to Thunderbird or other business schools to get into the mix. But basically, getting into this field, there's a few paths that are tried and true. And then there's, other ways that you can get in. So one of the common ways is people take part in international volunteer service. For example, the Peace Corps is a way that a lot of people get into international development as a whole. Different organizations like mine are always posting internships and different opportunities that you can check out on their websites. Just getting in the door in different NGOs is always a good way to kind of get into this work, working abroad. People in international develop or hiring managers in international development organizations are always looking for people who have lived in difficult contexts, who have volunteer service, kind of doing these types of international projects. And also, you can get in on the donor level, so you could work at USAID or do internships at other donor organizations, whether they're in the U.S. or abroad, because the United States is not the only country that does international development abroad.
Right.
And then also the last thing I'll say is you could get your foot in the door at like multilateral institutions like the World Bank or the United Nations.
Okay. And then how do you develop these skills? Like, is there certain things that you really need to get into this kind of role?
Yeah, I used to think so, and actually there's very few, but there are a few um, academic programs at different institutions all around the world, actually, that you can concentrate in international development and those types of studies. But from my experience, even just at my current organization, people have so many different backgrounds. I think it depends on what technical area you want to get into. Like if you want to get into impact investing and private sector engagement, experience with the private sector previously is helpful. Working at any private organization in any type of corporate social responsibility role would be helpful. Startups helpful because my team kind of operates like a startup. And then also just kind of having like a global mindset, global outlook is also very helpful. Yeah, for my area of work, it's good to know a little bit about finance and accounting if possible. Obviously using different types of technology, I think will help you in any role in international development. But if you're looking to get into a more technical area, like health or nutrition or youth empowerment or something like that, having experience at least working, not necessarily academic, but working with those different groups or working on projects that focus on those specific sector areas is going to be very helpful.
That's great. That's great. But any kind of I know you mentioned about like, hey, there are so many courses available in maybe to some universities, but do you think there is any certification or anything that you would recommend, or if someone just want to get this job, right? Like, is there any networking group that they should get part of? Like, how should that all work together?
Sure. Well, I must say there is an amazing network. If you, well, you don't have to be a woman of color, but you could be an ally or a supporter. There's an organization called Women of Color Advancing Peace and Security. And international development, I'm not going to go down a rabbit hole, but international development is just one part of our broader national security strategy in the United States, along with diplomacy and defense and others. So we focus on all of those areas and all of those intersections in that organization. And I'm actually a staff member there too, part-time. So happy to elaborate on that as well. There's a network called the Global Impact Investing Network, and they have events and research and reading and trainings and webinars and everything that you can attend and pick up some of these skills and kind of, network. These are really great networking organizations. Another one is Andy, which is the Andy Network of Development Entrepreneurs. Another amazing network where they talk about private sector engagement and impact investing all day. Social Capital Markets, aka SOCAP, is another one. I know a lot of people tap into their Peace Corps experience, huge network. And even if you're not a Peace Corps volunteer, there are some, events and activities that are extended to folks who, may have not served in the Peace Corps. And then also, just seeking out different degree programs. DevX is another good one, which has a lot of news and events and resources for people who are interested in international development. I just want to also add another skill that I kind of think is really important, especially given our climate, at least in the United States right now. If you want to work at a development organization in the United States, there's a huge reckoning right now with like the history and the colonial legacies that are really embedded in our sector and are still practiced today. And just kind of having a mindset and having that knowledge in the back of your mind, I think will go a long way. There's a huge movement to kind of decolonize the sector and introduce new actors into the development finance space, which again is something that is on the edge of our mind, my team on the edge of our minds as we kind of go forward in our work. Because, private sector engagement and impact investing lends itself to localization, for example, which is a way of getting local actors involved in owning their own development rather than us telling them, you need to develop this way, right? So having that knowledge and the history of those legacies and understanding how that's playing out in our sector right now, real time, is another, I think, competency that's important.
Right. One last question that pops, in my mind. Today, there is no business without tech. We name it like fintech, health tech, HR tech, but eventually, like, there will be no business without tech. Tech will be the mandatory part of every business and every industry. How do you see technology impacting this sector?
So there's a lot of exciting things happening, and we have a term right now that it's kind of been around for a while. It's called ICT 4D, which is, technology for development.
Yeah.
And digitalization is huge. Making sure that our systems are accurate. In the development sector, we have been working to get the best data that we can
Yeah.
working to optimize the use of that data. Like there's a lot swirling around technology. There's also, I'm not a huge expert on all of this stuff, but maybe soon. Blockchain technology has a place in international development if that's something you're interested in. And cryptocurrency, believe it or not. UNICEF has a crypto fund.
Wow.
So with all of the emerging like crypto millionaires and billionaires in the world, right? How and basically those folks are very inclined to donate towards charitable purposes and such, which is a big part of some international development organizations like funding and all that. So having a crypto fund allows us to actually capitalize off of those donations and receive those funds. And it's just very interesting. And a lot of those, the UNICEF fund, for example, they are only awarding, I guess, awards or grants to projects that have a very focused technology component. So yeah, there's a lot going on. We're
Yeah.
trying to get the world digitalized and connect people and let everybody have the same amount of access to technology around the world. So it's going to increasingly play a huge role in international development moving
That's
forward.
perfect. And so, techies out there who are listening to this podcast, if you are in crypto, blockchain kind of technology, this sector is definitely a booming opportunity. You must explore it as a career option. So, Gabby, thank you so much for sharing all these detailed insights of this unique, highly growing sector. Any final recommendation? You graduated a couple of years back as a fresher, and then now you have tons of experience. Also, any recommendation, final thoughts that you want to share with our talent pool who can learn something on how to approach this job?
Sure. I would just say don't limit yourself. I mean, when I was in business school, I was thinking, okay, I have to go to a private company and do this. I work at an NGO now. And I found just as much fulfillment, number one. And number two, the skill sets are very much needed in, the NGO nonprofit world. It's not just something that we should silo ourselves to, the private companies. One. Number two, clearly private companies and nonprofits are integrated. They work together in a lot of ways, and there's a lot of ways to bounce back and forth between the two of them. So I'd say don't limit yourself. I didn't know anything about impact investing or private sector engagement, as a concept in international development when I was studying, and it's very interesting. Just keep an open mind.
Perfect. That's great, Gabby. Thank you for taking time and sharing all these great insights. I think the talent pool or whoever listening to this podcast would have learned a lot. And I personally am very, very thankful to you. Thank you for joining me here. Take care.